Welcome to Midnight Delight. Tonight, we venture into the unknown, where every shadow hides a secret, and every sound has a sinister tale to tell. So light a candle, settle in, and let the darkness take over as we unravel another chilling story that will haunt your dreams. This is Midnight Delight, where nightmares come to play. I always loved the outdoors. Ever since I was a kid, camping trips with my family were the highlight of my summers. This time, I decided to go solo. Just me, my backpack, and the untouched wilderness. It was supposed to be a peaceful retreat, a break from the daily grind. Little did I know, it would become a night I'd never forget. I set up my tent near a serene lake, surrounded by tall pines. The sun was setting, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink. As darkness crept in, I built a small fire and settled in for the night. The sounds of nature were soothing, crickets chirping, leaves rustling in the breeze, and the occasional splash from the lake. Everything was perfect, until I heard it. A low growl echoed through the trees. I brushed it off, thinking it was just a distant animal. But then I saw a shadow move. It was fast. Too fast to be any deer or any animal I knew. My heart started to race. I tried to calm myself, but the uneasy feeling only grew stronger. As the night wore on, the noises became more frequent. Branches snapping, leaves crunching, and that growl. Closer this time. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it into the woods. Nothing. Just trees and darkness. But I could feel it. Something was out there, watching me. I retreated to my tent, hoping the thin walls would provide some sense of security. Sleep was impossible. I lay there, listening, every sound amplified in the silence. Then, just as I was about to drift off, I heard a scratching noise right outside my tent. My blood ran cold. I held my breath, praying it was just my imagination. But the scratching continued, slowly moving around the tent, circling me. I mustered the courage to unzip the tent and peek outside. What I saw next made my heart stop. Glowing eyes staring back at me from the darkness. My instinct screamed at me to run, but my whole body was frozen with fear. Those eyes, they were unlike anything I'd ever seen, reflecting an eerie light in the pitch-black night. They disappeared as quickly as they had appeared, leaving me in a state of panic. I knew I couldn't stay in my tent. Grabbing my flashlight and a pocket knife, I ventured out, trying to stay calm. Every step I took felt like I was walking on eggshells. The growling and scratching had stopped, but the forest was still too silent, as if it was holding its breath. I decided to head towards the lake, thinking the open space might be safer. As I approached the water, I noticed something strange. The reflection on the surface wasn't just the moon and stars. There were ripples, but no wind. And then I saw it again. Those eyes, this time in the water, staring up at me. Panic surged through me. I backed away, but the ground beneath my feet felt uneven, shifting suddenly. A cold hand grabbed my ankle, pulling me down. I fought to free myself, kicking and screaming. The grip was strong, but I managed to break free, stumbling back onto solid ground. I didn't wait to see what it was. I ran as fast as I could, not caring where I was going. I just needed to get away. The forest felt like a maze, every turn leading me deeper into its grasp. My flashlight flickered and then died, plunging me into darkness. Out of nowhere, a blinding light illuminated the trees. I was disoriented, unsure if it was a rescue or another threat. The light was coming from above, a low humming sound filling the air. I looked up to see a massive saucer-shaped object hovering above the treetops. Before I could react, a beam of light enveloped me, lifting me off the ground. I felt weightless, floating towards the craft. My vision blurred, and I lost consciousness. I woke up in my tent, the morning sun shining through the fabric. Was it all a dream? I checked my ankle, and there it was, a bruise in the shape of a handprint. I packed up and left as quickly as I could, vowing never to return to those woods. To this day, I can't explain what happened. Was it a cryptid, an alien, or something else entirely? All I know is it's out there, and I'm never going back. Ever since I was a kid, my dad and I had a tradition of going hunting every fall. This year I decided to keep the tradition alive, even though he passed away last year. I headed to our usual spot deep in the heart of the woods. It was a place filled with memories, both good and bad. I set up camp and prepared for the night. The forest was eerily quiet, more so than usual. As I sat by the campfire, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I felt like I was being watched. Just as I was about to head to the tent, I saw something. A bright light in the sky, moving erratically. It wasn't a plane or a helicopter. It was something else, something I couldn't explain. The light hovered for a moment and then shot off in the distance, disappearing behind the treetops. Curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed my flashlight and decided to follow it. The forest seemed to come alive as I walked, every rustle of leaves and snap of branches echoing in the silence. The light had disappeared, but I was determined to find out what it was. As I ventured deeper, I noticed strange markings on the trees, like claw marks but larger than any animal I knew of. My unease grew with each step, but I pressed on. Then I heard it. A low humming sound, almost mechanical. I turned off my flashlight and crept forward, trying to stay quiet. The sound led me to a clearing, and what I saw made my heart pound in my chest. There in the middle of the clearing was a large metallic object. It was like something out of a sci-fi movie, with lights pulsating along its surface. I hid behind a tree, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Suddenly, a door on the object opened, and a figure emerged. It was humanoid, but not quite human. Its eyes glowed a piercing blue, and its movements were almost robotic. It scanned the area, and I held my breath, praying it wouldn't see me. Just as I thought I was safe, a branch snapped under my foot. The figure turned its head sharply, and our eyes met. Panic surged through me, and I turned to run. I could hear the creature pursuing me. Its footsteps were unnervingly fast. I stumbled and fell, my flashlight skidding away. I scrambled to my feet and ran blindly through the forest, the creature's footsteps growing louder. Just as I thought it was going to catch me, I burst into another clearing and saw my campfire in the distance. I dove for it, grabbing my rifle, but when I turned around, the creature was gone. The forest was silent again, but the feeling of being watched never left. I knew this wasn't over. I spent the night huddled by my fire, my rifle close at hand. Sleep was impossible. Every sound made me jump, my mind racing with thoughts of the creature. When morning finally came, I decided it was time to leave. Whatever I had seen, I didn't want to encounter it again. I packed up my gear and started hiking back to my truck. The forest felt different in the daylight, less menacing, but the memory of the creature's glowing eyes stayed with me. As I neared the edge of the forest, I heard the humming sound again. It was faint, but unmistakable. Against my better judgment, I followed it. The sound led me to a cave, hidden behind a thick curtain of vines. I hesitated, but then pushed the vines aside and stepped inside. The cave was dark and damp, the walls covered in strange symbols. The humming was louder now, coming from deeper within. I followed the sound until I reached a large chamber. In the center was another metallic object, smaller than the one I had seen the night before, but similar in design. It was a sphere with lights pulsating along its surface. As I approached, the lights intensified and a panel slid open, revealing a screen. The screen flickered to life, displaying images of the forest, the creature, and then me. My heart pounded as I realized I was being watched, studied. The images changed, showing symbols and diagrams I couldn't understand. It felt like I was looking at some kind of alien technology. Before I could react, a voice echoed in the chamber. It was calm, almost soothing, but the words were incomprehensible. The screen shifted to show the creature again, this time standing in the cave entrance. I turned, and there it was, watching me. It didn't move, just stared with those piercing blue eyes. The voice continued, and I realized it was trying to communicate. I took a step back, raising my rifle, but the creature didn't seem threatened. Instead, it pointed to the screen, which now displayed a star map. I didn't understand what it wanted, but I felt a strange compulsion to listen. The creature approached the sphere, touching it, and the screen changed again, showing a series of images that seemed to tell a story. A story of a lost traveler stranded on our planet, seeking a way home. I lowered my rifle. The pieces starting to fall into place. This wasn't just a random encounter, it was a plea for help. I didn't know how or why, but I felt an overwhelming urge to assist. I spent the next few hours in the cave working with the creature to decipher the technology. It was a surreal experience, but somehow we managed to activate the sphere. The chamber filled with light and the creature stepped inside. It turned to me, nodding as if to say thank you, and then it was gone, the sphere vanishing with it. I left the cave, my mind reeling from the experience. I don't know if anyone will believe my story, but I know what I saw. Last fall, my friends and I decided to go on a hunting trip in the mountains. We'd been planning it for months, looking forward to a weekend away from the city. There were 4 of us: Mike, Jake, Sarah, and myself. We'd all grown up together, and these trips had become a tradition. We set up camp in a clearing near a river, surrounded by dense forest. The first day went by smoothly. We hiked, fished, and shared stories around the campfire. As night fell, a cold wind started to blow, and the forest seemed to come alive with strange sounds. Around midnight, Jake mentioned an old cabin he had seen on a previous trip. It was supposed to be abandoned, hidden deep in the woods. Sarah and I were curious, but Mike was hesitant. He had a bad feeling about it, but Jake's excitement was contagious, and we finally convinced him to join us. Armed with flashlights and rifles, we set out into the dark forest. The deeper we went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The trees seemed to close in around us, and the usual sounds of the forest were replaced by an eerie silence. After what felt like hours, we finally saw it. The cabin. It was old and decrepit, half hidden by overgrown vegetation. The windows were broken and the door hung ajar, creaking in the wind. We approached cautiously, our flashlights casting long shadows on the weathered walls. Inside, the cabin was even more unsettling. The air was thick with dust and the floor was littered with debris. Old furniture lay scattered around and strange symbols were carved into the walls. Jake found an old journal on the table and started reading it aloud. The journal belonged to someone named Henry, who had lived in the cabin decades ago. His entries grew more and more frantic, describing strange occurrences and sightings of shadowy figures in the woods. The last entry was cut off mid-sentence, as if Henry had left in a hurry. A sudden noise outside made us jump. Mike shone his flashlight through the window, but we saw nothing. We decided it was time to leave, but as we stepped outside, the forest felt different. The air was colder, and the trees seemed to be watching us. We hurried back to our camp, trying to shake off the feeling of being followed. That night, none of us slept well. Strange noises echoed through the forest, and we kept hearing footsteps circling our tents. The next morning, we found tracks around our campsite, but they didn't belong to any animal we knew. They were large, humanoid, and deep, as if whatever had made them was incredibly heavy. We decided to pack up and leave, but curiosity got the better of us. We wanted to know what happened to Henry. We returned to the cabin in daylight, hoping to find more clues. The place was just as eerie in the light, and the strange symbols on the wall seemed even more sinister. Jake continued reading the journal, and we discovered that Henry had been trying to summon something, some kind of ancient spirit. The entries detailed rituals and incantations, all meant to invoke the spirit for protection. But something had gone wrong. The spirit Henry had summoned wasn't the kind you want to encounter. It was evil, feeding on fear and tormenting those who dared to enter the cabin. As we read, a chill ran down my spine. It all made sense. The noises, the feeling of being watched, the tracks around our camp. We had disturbed something, and it wasn't happy. We decided to leave the cabin for good, but as we stepped outside, we saw them. Shadowy figures moving through the trees. Panic set in and we ran. The forest seemed to twist and turn, the paths changing before our eyes. No matter which way we went, we couldn't find our way back to camp. The figures were getting closer, their forms becoming more distinct. They were tall, with hollow eyes and twisted limbs like something out of a nightmare. Mike tripped and fell, and as we helped him up, one of the figures lunged at us. We fired our rifles, but the bullets seemed to pass right through them. We had no choice but to keep running, our hearts pounding in our chests. Finally, we burst out of the forest and into the clearing where our camp was. We didn't stop. We grabbed our gear and sped down the mountain, not looking back. It wasn't until we reached the safety of our cars that we felt we could breathe again. Back in the city, we tried to make sense of what had happened. We researched the symbols and found references to an ancient, vengeful spirit that haunted those who disturbed its resting place. We had inadvertently awakened it, and now it would haunt us forever. To this day, I can't go near the woods without feeling that same sense of dread. The memory of those shadowy figures haunts my dreams, and I know that somewhere out there, Henry's spirit and that evil entity are still waiting, watching, and ready to torment anyone who dares to enter that forsaken cabin. Thank you for joining me in this journey through the shadows. Remember, the stories we tell might just be more than fiction, and the darkness might be closer than you think. If you enjoyed this tale, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more terrifying stories that will keep you up at night. Until next time, sleep tight, if you can.